there was a mystery engine in there that came along after the 409s. It was actually looked like a 409 valve covers, but it was a 427 Chevrolet.
Okay.
And that was a mystery engine. That worth, if you had one of those today, it's worth gold because they didn't make very many of them.
Welcome back to BarryTsGarage. We have another time with Ed Smith answering your questions, and I'm so glad you came along. I'm looking forward to seeing what Ed has to say. Good morning, Ed.
Good morning. It's nice and chilly in here.
It is.
We don't have to worry about the heat overheating our equipment or anything. And
that's right.
Yeah, it's good.
It's good.
Good weather.
Winter is okay in Arizona.
Yeah, good. This is what it's all about.
That's right.
So what do we got today? We got some interesting questions.
We do have some good questions. I have quite a lot. I'm not sure if we're going to get through them all today or not.
All right.
Well, we'll give it a try. Let's start with Daryl Hudson. He wants to know what you think about the 409, or do you have any stories or memories of the 409 Chevy V8?
Yeah, the 409, first thing, I don't know, there was a mystery engine in there that came along after the 409s. It was actually looked like a 409 valve covers, but it was a 427 Chevrolet.
Okay.
And that was a mystery engine. That worth, if you had one of those today, it's worth gold because they didn't make very many of them. And it was extremely fast, but they were trying to turn over from the 348 409 style design into the 427. So this was a kind of a cross-reference between both of them.
So they made a few engines like that?
A few.
Okay.
I don't think there was very many. There's a couple guys in Phoenix here that had them, and they were the whatever they. But even though the 348, I remember when that first came out, it was a 1958.
That's right.
And that car too, you could had a couple friends that had them brand new, Biscayne, little red one dumped in front, and front bumper almost dragged the track, and we always had names on them, and I am going to tell you what the name of that one was but that was in Bryan, Ohio. Well, that's where I came from.
Okay.
Cruising around the courthouse there and stuff. But and I think then we had a friend of mine had a El Camino brand new. It was actually spotless, and it was a 4-speed 4-barrel car.
Okay.
And that El Camino, he ran a special class, maybe B-stock stick. And he won a lot of trophies with that car.
No kidding.
But it was spotless clean. I mean, he didn't have any dirt or no dust on it. But
so
then we ended up getting in a friend of mine bought a 60 Chevy convertible, 3-speed on the column, a convertible with 348 tri-power, solid lifters. So that was a 335 horsepower.
Wow.
And I drove that as much as he did.
Okay, so now all of those are 348. So there must be, when I ask about a 409 and you tell me 348, they must have a lot in common.
Absolutely, yeah, they do.
Okay.
Yeah, the stroke and the bore is a little different, yeah, to make it 409, yes.
Okay.
And so the 409 came out, and we were actually racing this convertible, this 348, 335, and also the El Camino, my friend's El Camino, and some racetracks in Indiana. And we were there, this one, and this kid's came from his dad owned a dealership, I think, in Terre Haute, Indiana. And he had this bubble top car with a gray motor in it. Nobody knew what it was, but 2 4-barrels. It was extremely fast. So somebody protested him, and I think he claimed he didn't know what it was either.
Okay.
So I was shocked that they were going to check it out. So he had it over on some wooden planks under the protest department, and they were taking the oil pan off. And I was wondering, what are you think you're doing, taking the oil pan off this brand new car?
Yeah.
But the motor was gray.
Huh.
And so we soon found out actually it was a 409.
Okay, so that was one of the first 409s?
Yeah, it's the first one that I ever remembered my whole lifetime.
Okay.
After that, we've had several. And with the 409, they had some with a 4-barrel carburetor, aluminum intake manifold, and then the tri-power and the 2 4-barrel. Tri-power, I don't think they made a 409 with tri-power, but they had 2 4-barrels, and that was really common motor.
Okay, and that was what, around 62 or 3?
62 or 3, yes.
Yeah, okay.
63, yeah.
Okay.
And then right before they turned into that mystery motor.
Okay.
And then right away they went into all the 396 and went on past that whole thing, yeah.
Right. So the 409 didn't really have that long of a life.
It didn't have very long, and the cylinder heads were a different angle.
Huh.
So they weren't the same 45-degree angle. that we would have any of the V8s like the big block. It had a cylinder head on it that was a kind of a crooked angle. So then you had a big, on the piston, it had a big dome on one side and nothing on the other side. So the piston looked real crooked to match the cylinder head and the valves. And so it's hard to put that thing together to get the pistons out, and it had a notch in the cylinder wall too. It was different angle. The chamber, combustion chamber, and the bore.
Okay.
So then it was hard to, if you had one tore apart, you had to get some special tools or else some tin cans or something, or the old pop can,
right,
to get around the rings and get the rings back down in the hill without breaking the rings.
Oh, because you're putting them in at an angle.
An angle, yes,
I see.
to the bore. Yeah, it's a little difficult.
So, okay, not the easiest motor ever to work on.
No,
then.
it wasn't.
It
was still a Chevy motor, so other than that, it was basically the same.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Distributor is a bigger diameter distributor, so it's different. 348 and 409 distributor was larger diameter than the other Chevrolet distributor that fits everything.
Yeah.
But other than that, it's about the same.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
good.
So it was a short era, but a good one.
There's quite a few of them in trucks.
Oh, really?
A dump truck would have a 409 in it. And possibly with a 4-barrel. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they're a torquey engine then, probably.
Yes, a big torque. Yeah, it would pull something in low gear. It had a lot of torque.
Yeah. Okay. What do you think about the Pontiac 347?
The 347?
Yeah.
I don't remember much about that at all.
I think that was around 58, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was 57, 58.
Yeah.
I think they didn't work on racing with him or anything.
Yeah.
I don't know if they were good for anything, but there was probably a lot of them in station wagons and stuff, and that went into that same history of 348. I mean, the 389s, when Chevrolet put 389 motors and transmissions, Pontiac motors and transmissions, and the GMC trucks.
Right.
And a hydromatic transmission and a Chevy and GMC truck.
GMC
not Chevy,
truck,
but,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the Chevy probably would have had a Chevrolet equivalent.
Would probably been, well,
trying to think what that would have been back then, other than a 348.
Yeah. Other than that, 348s. And I think probably, as far as I know, they put some 348 probably.
Yeah.
And some 3/4 ton trucks or even 1 ton.
Yeah.
Like a hauling furniture or something. But
sure.
And I think they put some of those motors, I hear that 348 cylinder heads. I have a set of 348 cylinder heads and there are something else, but they're also 409. But the cylinder heads, come to find out, they're truck heads.
Oh.
They don't have the big square ports as the 409 with the 2 4-barrels.
Oh, okay.
And that real car port had a big square port. It was probably almost a ½ inch bigger than the 348 port.
Okay.
So the intakes wouldn't match at all.
Right.
Even though, yeah, so there's quite a bit of difference in there. They tried to make an engine in there someplace. I mean, Chevrolet was searching for some horsepower.
Right. Now, as long as you mention the ports, and I'm always trying to learn from you as far as engine design. If you're making it bigger, is that for more high speed RPM?
Torque.
Or it's for torque?
Torque, yeah, not RPMs at all.
Okay.
Yeah, torque, more horsepower.
Okay.
And usually the bigger port, then you have to start stacking on carburation and camshaft.
Okay.
To get that air to flow.
Right. All right. Well, the next question, the same friend of ours asked about the Ford 428. What do you remember about those?
428 was actually a 390, I think 60 over.
Okay.
Or something.
Just a bigger bore 390?
Yes. And we used to take a 390, and they also made a 410.
For Mercury, right?
Mercury had a 410.
Yep.
But the 410 crank is the same as 428.
Oh.
Maybe a U3 crank or whatever exactly what they were.
Yeah.
There's a U1 maybe, but U3 crank was a 410 maybe, and it was the same as 428. So we took a lot of Ford 390 motors out of pickup trucks with campers, and put the 410 crank in it, and then bored it over. I think it was something like some crazy number, like 62.5 over.
Okay.
And put standard 428 pistons and crank in a 390 motor and put it in a Ford truck. And it really was a nice motor. It pulled the campers up the hill and going to Flagstaff and where we wanted them to. And And so we did quite a few of those motors. I probably did 20 or 25 of those motors in my lifetime. But the bearings were the same.
Okay.
It went right in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that was that whole family. It was
all
good,
right.
Yeah.
All right. Now, got another engine. You know, you're an engine guy, so we're going to have engine questions here. This is a little more modern. My 97 Dodge 5.2 liter. That's the 318 car, I think, right?
Yeah.
Needs a rebuild. It needs shims. I wonder if a stock motor, can you put shims in a stock motor?
Put what in them?
He's talking about shims for his engine. I don't know what the question means.
I don't know what he's doing with shims. You don't shim anything anymore.
Okay.
And nowadays, because shims is usually in bearings.
Right.
And usually shims only, and unless you're back in the 49 or something.
Right.
The shims were in the main bearings.
Okay.
And they give you a certain bearing, but the crankshafts, I don't think, were turned with quality turning or machine work. So you'd have to kind of put the bearings in with plastic gauge. That's that little thin piece of plastic, and you squeeze it in there, and it's squeezed out, and you can measure how much clearance you have.
Right.
And you shimmed it accordingly.
So he must have watched one of our videos on shimming earlier bearings.
Probably shimming a Ford bearings, a Model T or something.
You're right. And wondering
we don't
if
shim bearings.
you can't do that on the new stuff.
235 Chevys, 216 Chevys was common to shim those main bearings.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. I remember we talked about
even sometimes I've seen some guys that the shims came with a new set of main bearings for 1947 Chevy.
Okay.
So the guy put them in there for some reason.
Whether it needs it or not.
Needs it or not, because they came with it. So you check a little bit and you wonder why it had no oil pressure, very little, and you start taking the shims out and you start doing it like it's supposed to be.
Okay.
And then it had oil pressure after that. So
okay.
It's a little thing there.
All right. Well, there we go. That clears that up. Ask Ed about adjusting the carb balance with artificial enrichment method. Do you know what that is?
No, unless it has the vacuum.
Okay.
There's a vacuum little instrument you put on the top of the carburetor that's kind of a float, an air float.
Okay.
It opens up and floats in how much air is going past the carburation, the butterflies in the carburetor, whether the butterflies are seated or not.
Okay.
That's normally on maybe 2 or 3 carburetor engine.
Oh, you're trying to match them up.
To match them up, yes. And then usually you end up with ones pushing more. It's the idle screw is too high on one, higher than the other one.
Okay.
So one carburetor is shut off and the other one has maybe a 5,000th gap in the throttle valves.
I see.
That would tell you right away instead of start guessing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
We could use that real good on this blown Chrysler motor sitting here.
Yeah.
Supercharged 392 Chrysler Hemi. It's about 427 cubic inches.
Yeah.
The other day, we needed that valve on that to make it run right. No, we didn't.
Right.
It runs fine just the way it is.
No, it's good.
So
that was amazing. That was very impressive.
It's one of those things that you would have with tinkeritis.
Right.
Like
you keep going for a long time, right?
The guy, Robert King, on the Tino.
Yeah.
He says, sometimes you start tinkering with stuff and you shouldn't.
That's right.
Yeah, okay.
All right. Now, here's a friend of ours that has been very patient. Do you recall we did a video about setting up the Model T engine? You're setting up an engine for a Model T, and you said you're sending it to your friend to put it in, if I remember right. And it was too hot. It was the summertime, and now we've said it's cold now. This guy is saying, waiting for Ed to do that Model T. At the rate you're going, I will be in my grave. Please finish it. So I don't know if there's any access to that car.
I have no access to that motor because it was an older guy and he was 90-some years old.
Okay.
And he winters in Minnesota.
Okay.
And Wisconsin, I think.
Okay.
I mean, summer's there.
Summer's there, yeah.
Yeah. And this is after we finished that motor. Then he actually, I think he brought the chassis over here and we set the motor down the chassis with the motor mounts.
Okay.
And then him and his friend took it home.
Okay.
He has quite a big garage over here and close to us, 5 miles away. And he has several cars in that garage.
Okay.
Some other Model Ts he drives and some other different cars. But anyways, I think at the time he possibly went to back in Minnesota last summer.
Yep.
And I haven't heard from him since.
Okay.
I haven't heard any. I don't have no.
You don't know how to reach them.
I have no idea. Sure, I'd love to hear that motor run.
Yeah.
And actually drive the car.
Okay, well.
But I think it's probably non-existent as far as I know, unless something happens these days. Yeah.
Okay, well, his name is Tony. Tony, if we hear about that car, we'll do something with it.
We'll do something with it, yeah.
Okay. All right, here's the next one. The real question is, have you ever run a higher pressure cap to increase the pressure in the water jackets to raise the boiling point of your coolant?
Well, you can only raise it so much.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't put a 50-pound cap in there and hope that it's not going to boil. But the common sense is with some good radiators and good gaskets and stuff and how good your motor is, 12 pounds is quite a bit. But I think the other cars, is what we're talking about, Model A's and stuff, if they ever wanted to use a pressure thing, most usually the early cars didn't have pressure at all.
Right.
Because they didn't have any cooling problems.
Right.
If everything was okay.
Right.
And depends on some of these cars. It was kind of really weird what we see in the United States, because here we have such different temperatures from one end of the United States to the other, and the central thing, and back east, and humidity enters in that thing as how you're concerned with temperatures on the motor.
Yeah.
And we end up one of the weird things is like we get a Jaguar, and it's made for England.
Yeah.
The highest temperature in England is 80 degrees.
Right.
So
it's not used to Arizona's 120.
You bring the air to bring it to Phoenix, and it won't run at all.
Right.
You know, so you have to put a cap in at some place, but all you're looking for is if you start putting a higher cap in it is problems. Gasket problems, and with today's radiators, splitting the seams on the radiators and things like this with that much pressure. But
so,
that's right.
Okay.
That's why the cap's in there.
Right. But you bring up a very good point. You think of just in isolation, it's just the boiling point. You can raise the boiling point, but we're not always thinking about the whole rest of the cooling system that might not be good for it.
That's right. Heater core.
Yeah. Right.
Especially, yeah.
Yeah.
Now we go back a little bit now. We'll just step back 2 seconds here. And NASCAR. Now NASCAR has got probably the most quality cooling system in the whole world. Most of the radiator hoses are threaded.
Oh, wow.
Yes. On a good NASCAR motor, we see it running on a 500-mile race, and if he actually loses the water out of the radiator, it isn't uncommon for him to go 5 or 6 laps with no water in the radiator.
That's wild.
That's how good the motors are, and with lubrication and the wind flowing and whatever else you could go. But I mean, that's the case. He says, "Hey, we got 3 laps to go. We don't worry about the radiator. Just keep going.
Right.
We don't care what it costs." But even though their systems, and I don't know personally, I don't know what size cap they run. Okay. I would think that's probably in the 25, 30 pounds at least.
Okay.
Yes, I think so.
All right.
Yeah.
Interesting. All right. Now we're back to engine block question. Someone named Steven says he's looking for a nice square 400 block that was made with high nickel content. He said the 400 that was cast really nice were in station wagons with a nodular steel crank. He says most don't realize it was a steel crank. It had 3 sets of numbers on it, 09, 09, 06 or something like that on the and there was a dash between the numbers. Do you know anything about the steel crank or high nickel content 400 engine?
No.
Okay.
It's hard to get the 400 motor. You have to be careful with those because they were made in Mexico.
Oh, really?
Yes. And I'll talk about 400 motors if you want to know about 400 motors and what we know about them. The Chevy dealer here in town, which is a courtesy Chevrolet, was a factory, of course, Chevrolet dealer. And then there was a Mr. I don't know what's the name, but I think it was Mr. Whitehouse.
Okay.
And he was the factory rep, parts rep for General Motors.
Okay.
And even those 400 motors, we had some of them. And I think my friend at Chuck's Speed Shop in town bought some of them. And we went down, and I think we bought the last 15 crate motors they had, 400s. We took them apart, and it wasn't uncommon to have missing one rod bearing in the middle in the block.
You're kidding.
Yeah, they just let the rod bearing out. And then now some of them were drilled between the block and the camshaft. The hole wasn't even drilled in it. So they were troubled to fail right away. And then we had some of them that was in maybe a bread truck, or a friend of mine had a bread truck, and it shook. And they never had to weight on the flywheel. They were externally balanced.
Wow.
But every one of those 400 motors we found, we took them apart and compared. We took every one we bought, and we bought them cheap. The last, I think, about 15 or 16 we bought from Courtesy Chevrolet.
Yeah.
Took all that. But Mr. Whitehouse's same was stamped on the crate. So they were not to be put in motors or anything, or put in cars as replaced motors and stuff. So
obviously you couldn't trust them.
no, I really couldn't trust them at all. We took every one of them apart and exchanged it. It was surprising what there was left out of them or put in wrong.
Wow.
Yeah, they were kind of a weird motor. Once we got that straightened out, we used on our dirt track cars and
Okay.
and all
Yeah,
kinds
once
of
you get them right.
It was the two different versions of that, and actually the 400 had casting for 3 freeze plugs on the side. With the ones with 4-bolt mains, 400 with 4-bolt mains had 3 freeze plugs in it, and the ones that were casted holes for the freeze plug or dimples and only had 2 freeze plugs in it was a 2-bolt main.
Huh. Okay.
And the main bearings caps were wider splayed, so it was a wider cap in it.
Okay.
And then the crankshaft was bigger diameter than a 350. We had some shell kits that we put in the 400 block, and we put a 350 bearing in it, so it was double the main bearings. And we could put a 350 crank in a 400 block.
Oh.
Yes, and that's those pistons I have over there. Nice set. I got 2 sets of those pistons. Really nice.
Wow.
And that made a 377 cubic inch. So that was a big bore, short stroke.
Okay.
And we loved that motor in our dirt track cars.
Yeah, they would like to rev, wouldn't they?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So we had that thing for the 400s, and we didn't have anything about the holes in the cylinder heads, the seam holes and stuff, because the cylinders were hooked together. There was no gap. There's no place between them.
Okay.
So they were that was that big in that small block. So it was quite a little story about 400s, but I like them. They ran good.
And I know this is my question, not
Yeah.
in here, but of course Pontiac had a 400 too, didn't they?
Yes, that was a bigger motor. That was a 389 type motor.
389, yeah.
Yeah, longer block. And stuff. Yeah.
Okay. Someone said, ask Ed if you can put Cleveland heads on a small block Chevy.
Ford Cleveland heads? Why would you want to do that?
He doesn't say why. He says, can you do it? I don't know. Doesn't sound like a good idea, does it?
No. Now, the other day, there was a guy in the shop the other day quizzing me as what he's doing.
Yeah.
And he's got quite a combination, and I was surprised at today's things they were doing to these motors in some way. It's got a lot of money. He had a particular motor. He was putting Ford Cleveland heads on it, 2-barrel heads.
Okay.
And that's the small port head.
Okay, right.
Yes. And now he's making an intake manifold for it.
And what kind of
prefab manifold? I saw aluminum with these heads, and put a lot of carburation on this because the heads were so small, and the combustion chamber and everything else, that it would go to be a high flow engine. And he was going to put it in a Pantera.
Now, was it like a 351 block?
Yes, probably.
Okay.
But putting the M heads on it, it was quite a combination he was telling me about. And
yeah.
I says, this thing's going to have so much high RPM horsepower that probably in a Pantera, I don't know what he's going to do, but first and second gear, and he's all done then. He's already way over the speed limit. Not necessarily. I don't care about speed limits.
Right.
But anyways, that he would never use that whole motor, but it surprised me they would spend that much money on it today for Pantera.
That's interesting.
It was interesting. He was in yesterday, and we were talking about it.
That's fun.
So I have some friends like that. I just love my friends.
Yeah.
They come in with stories and what's going on with some people here in town. And we were talking the other day about the Walmart people that have a car collection here in town, and a bunch of cars and stuff. And then some other people over in Scottsdale that have big garages and have, well, I think one of your friends has some foreign cars there, race cars from 1909 or something, and some foreign engines.
Yeah.
Really interesting.
Yeah, it is.
Life's fun.
Yeah, it is fun.
You get these friends and we all talk about it.
Yeah, we all have different things we know, and that's,
So
that's
really
great.
Interesting.
That's fantastic. All right, here's another question. And you're doing a great job, by the way. Does Ed have any information or stories regarding the Saginaw Chevy transmission, regarding specific applications or preferences for drag or any other kind of racing versus daily driver? He grew up in the general area, I guess Saginaw, Michigan, and had several relatives and friends that worked there, but he never got too many stories from them before they were gone. Do you know anything about those?
A little bit. They were actually, they came in after the Muncie transmission.
Okay.
And the Muncie transmission was an aluminum transmission. And actually, the Saginaw came in the Camaros and things like this, and a 4-speed transmission. They were a lot quieter than Muncie. Didn't make as much noise. And I think somebody asked me the other day about rebuilding one. I says, yeah, sure, I'll rebuild them. There's no big deal.
Yeah.
You could get parts for them and stuff, and of course you get all the parts for them. But they were just as strong as a Muncie.
Okay.
There's no difference between that and some of the things that probably maybe a little bit stronger than a Muncie. And then we started using them, the 3-speed Muncie transmission. You're not going to talk about that, but anyways, in our dirt track cars, because we had ran stick shift transmissions.
Okay.
So we would use a Saginaw transmission, and maybe someone I would leave. I think we have to have reverse and second gear and third gear in our things, And we took out first gear and left it out of the transmission. Just left it out.
Okay.
And we left the synchro rings out because it was in a dirt track car. You just kind of bang it in the gear.
Right.
So we welded up some things like that in the transmission so it wouldn't go in low gear at all. So it worked really good in that, and it was a good, strong transmission.
So I guess there's enough power in the car. You don't really need first gear to get going.
No, you don't. It's just basically running a high gear with a 557 rear end and whatever the tires are.
Okay. And I guess it's just for saving weight? Some
of the truck transmissions then, 3 speeds, had different gear ratios in them. And low gear and second gear. There was all kinds of combinations you could get in that, and you couldn't get it in a Muncie. Couldn't change the gears like that. So it was a favorable transmission years ago with our dirt tracks.
Yeah.
Okay,
now here's someone that has kind of a let's dream question. I like how this guy's thinking.
We can handle that too.
Okay, a guy named Nick says, please give Ed all the resources he wants to build his own custom vehicle. Let him cherry pick the best designs, create the best of the best. That's about how the Ford GT was designed, as they say. Just like a chef, let him cook. So have you ever had thoughts about building your own car completely?
Well, I never have, but I don't think I could afford, he's talking about fixing a meal or something, because I never could afford the knife and spoon or something to start out with that. I build my own chassis sometimes. I built several T-buckets like this one sitting beside me here.
Right.
And we even bought the square tubing and built my own, the orange frame, and I built every bracket on here, and I just love doing that.
Yeah.
Because it is a little different than anybody else's, and my friends come in and look at that thing. Oh, that's a good place for your brake pedal and a good place for your gas pedal and the headers, and everything else matches up better than some of the other cars that they've ever seen.
Right.
So I build enough of them, I know what's right and wrong.
Yeah.
As far as building a chassis or something like this. And I'll have to laugh a little bit about building my own car. Sometimes I do think about that, and this is going to be funny, is that new Tesla truck.
Oh, the Cybertruck.
The Cybertruck. So I seen one the other day, I think it was on YouTube or someplace else, the guy made it out of maybe a Jeep chassis, but he put tin siding all over it. Roofing siding, the things all over the thing. And then there was another one that was made out of plywood.
Oh, wow.
Just plywood everywhere on the whole thing, and it looked just like that, but I would probably put one in that Cybertruck like that but I would put that 392 Chrysler Hemi in it with that carburetor sticking out through the hood with about 2-3 inch exhaust out the back of the thing.
Right.
And drive it in, and everybody says, there goes that Tesla truck. Oh no, look at it. Better look twice. Other than that, I've never had the opportunity. I'm not a body man. Again, I said it before, I don't know which side of the sandpaper to use, but I know that the sand sticks good in your hand, and
Yeah.
It's smooth. It's easy to smooth. Yeah. So other than that, I don't think I pay somebody else to do that.
That's good.
Yeah,
That's probably smart. All right, next question. You were talking about putting Ford lifters in a Chevy. Remember that?
Yeah, we talked a little bit about that.
Okay, so someone is saying, isn't a Ford lifter a different length? Would you need a special length push rods?
Oh, possibly, sure. Yeah, we change push rods all the time. Order different lengths and stuff. We have our gauges and stuff, and where the rocker arm, and now today's heads, the valves may be higher in the heads and the aluminum heads and things like this, and the longer the valves, where the rocker arm touches, where the roller touches on the end of the stem of the valve, we change and order special length push rods all the time.
Okay.
That's not.
So you almost don't mention it because it's automatically something you do. You just don't even think.
Yeah, automatically. It's be rare for us to put any kind of a motor together in a completely original stock without mentioning the push rods.
Yeah. Okay.
This is one of the things they have to do. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. Standard procedure. All right. Mike Smith says, I wouldn't run a bronze gear at the bottom of a distributor shaft. Bronze and steel expand at different rates when heated. I would take a stock steel gear first. So he's talking about that bronze. What do you think about that, Ed?
So the bronze gear, I ran bronze gears, and then eat up the gear before it eats up the cam.
Okay.
But again, you go back and do the distributors like I told. Take the hacksaw and saw the groove in the distributor so it oils better. If you think it needs more oil, put 2 grooves in it. You know, and make sure that gear gets enough oil.
Okay.
And it shouldn't wear out anything.
So you're not worried about the heat difference between?
No, but it ain't supposed to get hot.
Yeah.
I mean, you got oil running over it, and it don't get hot. It's not a part of the exhaust system or anything.
Right. If it's not an exhaust valve.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and it's not going to heat up.
Okay.
It shouldn't heat up at all. I would be concerned if it was so tight against the camshaft that it's going to cause heat.
Okay.
No more than what's in the regular motor. The oil in the motor should be way under 200 degrees. Yeah,
so it's not that big a deal.
It's not that big a deal, yeah.
Okay, well, that's good. Can you please ask Ed if advancing or retarding a camshaft changes the sound of the motor?
Absolutely.
Okay, which
it changes the compression ratio.
Okay.
The more you advance it, you have more compression cranking. Yeah.
Okay, so what would happen to the engine sound at that
It'll be
point?
crisper.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah, snappier because it's got more compression, more bang. You got a compression there, it's going to be slight, but normally engine weighs 110, 115 pounds compression. You advance the camshaft, you'll end up be 130 pounds.
Okay.
Because the piston changes and it's going to compress that fuel in there.
Okay.
A lot more. With the valves closed quicker, then the piston comes up, it's going to change that compression. Of course, it's going to run better.
Okay. Next question. The beauty of a D-stroke motor is you can actually make more power with smaller intake runners, i.e. stock heads. You can save a lot of money when you don't have to spend a ton on a trick set of heads. What do you think of that?
That's fine. Depends on what you're doing again.
Yeah.
There's only limits to everything. You know, with your budget, you can go to so many horsepower. After that, you start spending money.
Right.
And then, of course, you spend money, you spend a lot of money real quick. Because the big heads don't help you if you don't have a big cam.
Right.
If you don't have a big camshaft and you don't know that, now you need some more piston. And now you need a bigger exhaust too.
Right.
A little better valve springs and stuff, so there's no limit. The guys, how fast you want to go, how much money you got.
That's right.
Yeah, so that's the same thing. Yeah.
Same thing. So that's just a matter of where you want to draw the line.
Yeah, where you want to draw the line. And some of those cars, the original cars ran fine. Some of those high-performance cars in the early days ran fine. They really ran good.
All right, so this goes back to a question, and you know, a lot of these questions obviously are related to videos we've made. This guy says, I don't understand how a keyway running the length of the block would work on the lifters. Wasn't that about the lifters not turning?
That's the way they did. There was a hollow lifter.
Okay.
The lifter had a slot in it, a 1/4-inch slot, and all the roller lifters now, that was a roller lifter. It had a 1/4-inch slot made right in the lifter.
Okay.
And a roller lifter, not a hydraulic.
Is this slot in the top or the bottom of the lifter?
Right in the middle.
Okay.
Yeah, in the middle of the lifter. The lifter is so long, and it has the slot has to be so much.
Okay.
Maybe if he has 500 thousandths, the slot would only be a 1/2 inch long.
Okay. Now you just answered the rest of his question because he said, how could it move up and down if there's a slot in it? But he's thinking the slot was underneath the bottom of the lifter, I guess.
No,
pushing.
right in the middle.
Okay.
Yeah. The lift, you pick the old set of lifters, that was Howard Cams, I think. I mentioned that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the first lifter. They had no idea how to keep that lifter from turning.
Mm-hmm. If it's
And
got
now-
a roller, it's
now
got to
that
stay
roller
lined
lifter
up.
can be as tall as you want it to be.
Uh-huh.
I mean, it don't have to be whatever. It could be 3 inches tall. I have some roller lifters over here almost 3 inches tall. So then that cam would have had plenty of room.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Okay, that clarifies that. That's good.
yeah. Good question.
It's a good question.
I like good questions like that.
Yeah.
It's kind of something, and I can understand what people talk about that thing, and they thinking, because everybody's got their own mind, and they're thinking, oh, that ain't going to work or something like
Right.
this, until they explain it. And usually in my whole things that we do every day here, that we get, if we have a problem, we get 3 or 4 guys together. That's the whole main thing. And they ask everybody, come on over here, all you guys in the machine shop across the street, what do you think about this?
Mm,
And one of them, I have a better idea than the whole bunch.
right.
And so the guys, well, that's what happened there, right there. And pretty soon this problem is solved, instead of something that you overlook things a lot.
Sure.
One person will, or 2 people.
Yeah,
You get the whole team together, team effort.
that's
And
excellent.
that always usually solves the problem.
Yeah, a lot faster.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. I've got 2 questions about clutches. You know, we did a little video about clutches.
Okay.
And I guess you're talking about doing the solid clutch without the springs?
Yeah, probably could be.
Okay, he said you should have left the part with the springs. Hearing this man's take on things is interesting. So I guess he's wondering what would happen. Like, is it okay to not have the springs, to have that solid clutch disc?
It's absolutely okay. The older cars sometimes, even the Model A's and stuff like this, you let the clutch out, the whole car jerked.
Right.
Yeah. And so the clutch was so severe that days it would jerk. And so anyways, that springs in it, all it does is take that play out of the shaking the drive shaft
Okay.
and jerking the car as you take off in first gear or reverse. We would put that solid clutch in it in a ClutchFlite, an automatic transmission with a solid clutch like a Dodge ClutchFlite or some of these other cars.
Yep.
And I'm sure the top fuel cars, they'd have 3 or 4 discs in them. There's no springs in there.
No,
No,
they're
there's no-
just going to bang on.
There's no springs in there.
That's right.
And sometimes those cars, the worst thing is the springs break.
Yeah,
If you broke a spring, the whole thing's all in the street.
right.
'Cause
You
it
don't want
throws it so much out of balance, pieces go everywhere just
Yeah.
because a little spring broke.
Right.
Yeah, so
So that's another hazard.
Some of the trucks have got big long springs in them and bigger diameter springs in some of the diesel truck clutches to make them nice and smooth. Yeah.
All right. Well, on this, we've got a couple in a row here. The next one is, so is the ClutchFlite system, you just mentioned that, is it similar to the TorqueFlite?
Yes, it is a TorqueFlite transmission
Oh,
with a clutch in front.
instead of a torque converter?
Yes,
Okay.
Yeah.
And the transmission's the same.
same thing, yeah.
Got
Change
it.
the input shaft to put a spline on the front and a longer shaft that would go through the flywheel and stuff, yeah.
Okay.
My first ones I bought, and actually it was kind of a thing that I had a little problem with the Anglia I was racing. I was driving the car then, and that we didn't have much shield on it anyways, but we had a 11-inch Chevy clutch in it. Borg and Beck, that's a 3-finger clutch. It would work in that mechanism that they sold. B&M sold it to me and stuff like this. And then we ran it for quite a while. And then when I was racing it not necessarily the last time, but the last time I ran, that actually when I picked the front wheels up all the time, that's the little red car, the Anglia. It was stood on the rear bumper. You have some
Yeah.
pictures of that sometimes
Uh-huh.
with on the cartoons on the trunk and stuff like this. But
That
anyways,
was fun. Yeah.
yeah. But I took off from first gear and the front wheels off the ground. And it was a push button transmission too then.
Oh,
Yeah, it was a push button. So when I pushed second gear, the whole thing dead. And the whole clutch came apart.
oh,
Took the bell housing out, everything, the flywheel, everything else, and pitched a big hole through the door and,
oh my
and
goodness.
pitched a hole about the size of a hand grenade out through the roof of the car.
Wow.
The little car I sat in the back seat, and I remember I looked back at it, and it was the same thing. I didn't feel anything.
No kidding.
And all I knew is that the car just fell to the ground with no forward motion.
Yeah.
And it was kind of weird. I could hear something, and the motor's still running. I could hear something dragging the ground. So first I pulled off the track real quick and turned off real quick, and I got out of the car, and this guy took my helmet off and looked at it, and of course it took the whole bell housing and everything out of the transmission, and the headers were dragging the ground.
Whoa.
Yeah, the collectors, big long collectors on it, and they were dragging the ground and had a hole through the door and out through the door.
Oh my God.
Things like this. And so after that, it didn't hurt the transmission, so we cut the aluminum transmission off the original 727. I cut a hole in it for the clutch arm.
Oh.
And all bolted in there without a scatter shield or anything.
Uh-oh.
It was the clutch springs that came apart.
Wow.
Had nothing to do with the transmission or anything. Didn't hurt the motor, but anyways, it was one of those springs like we just talked about.
Huh.
And then once it came apart, it threw it out of balance so much that it just took the whole balance and all the flywheel bolts or the clutch bolts right off. And I think there was clutch springs, that spring that goes in the pressure plate.
Yep.
On the outside there. A couple of those were on the package shelf up in the back window of the car. So it had pieces everywhere, but we fixed it back again and bought a Lakewood bell housing then. We put it all in that, and we ran it for years after that.
All right.
So it was kind of fun.
Well, we're staying in the same part of the engine bay. This next friend of ours says, I'd like to know what Ed says about lockup torque converters, stall speeds, and Powerglides.
Okay.
That's a big list right there.
It's a big thing.
Let's start off with the lockup torque converters. Do you like them?
Yes, they're fine. Yeah, that's fine. It's just a lockup, and you go down the road, and once you're in fifth gear or fourth gear, something like the 727s in fourth gear, and you can gauge that whatever you want. There's switches and solenoids in the transmission, and then change the switch, and once you get a certain mile an hour in high gear, after it's in high gear, and you get above 55 miles an hour or something, it locks up the converter.
Okay.
It's got a clutch in it, and all the clutch is the transmission oil under certain pounds, maybe 50 or 60 pounds. Usually I think we should say something about the oil transmission cooler lines going to the radiator. It was about 20 pounds.
Okay.
Yeah, and then they started putting some stuff in the front pump and a little bit higher pressure. And I think the maximum in that thing is about 70 pounds in a transmission oil cooler. The line's going to the cooler.
Yeah.
But anyways, that same oil, that's enough oil. If you put oil into the converter and don't let it return, it's going to get tighter and tighter, enough to apply a clutch.
Right. Okay.
To move the piston over in the clutch. And that gives you that 1/2 shift.
Okay, right. That little notch.
So that's the lockup.
Do you ever use that in racing?
No.
Okay.
No, that's the last thing we would use in racing. Yeah.
Okay. And then, so that was that. What about stall speeds? What do you like for stall speeds?
Stall speeds are fine, but I don't like them on the street. I like a little bit. And so that would be the same thing as a Turbo 350 as a 11-inch torque converter. The Turbo 400 is a 12-inch torque converter, 12 inches in diameter. And then if you want a stall speed, like I was saying on one of my other videos, we would go get one out of a Monza, a 10-inch converter out of a 4-cylinder Chevy Monza.
Or a Vega?
Or Vega, yeah, Vega. Or an early Opel, GT Opel had maybe a 9-inch converter.
Okay.
The smaller the converter is just like a big wheel, tire. It goes slower and slower and slower. So you can get a lot of stall speed by just using the right torque converter for your thing.
Okay.
But the only thing about it is that if you have an engine with 300 horsepower and you have a certain torque converter, and if you put an engine in with 400 horsepower, it'll just spin that torque converter.
Right.
So every time you change the motor, you have to change the torque converter.
Okay. You've got to match them up.
Match them up, where it tightens it up or not.
I just realized maybe not everyone knows what stall speed is. You want
Stall speed is when you can hold the brake and rev the engine in gear before it starts spinning the rear wheels.
Okay, so it's how much what the engine speed is before it starts catching
and tightening up everything into 1-to-1 and start slipping the rear wheels on the ground.
Right.
And usually a stocker sometimes is 900 and maybe 11 or 1200. So a nice one for the street, a little bit of a camshaft would be 1800. Stall speed would be fine. But I would not put a 3000 stall speed in it. I put some stall speeds in some guys' cars because they wanted it. They heard that was okay. 2 days later, they come back and wanted to take them back out again.
Right.
Change that converter back. He says, I can't drive it.
Right.
At the same time now, a 3,000 stall speed, 30, it will not spin the wheels in second gear. You can't bite the driving on the street.
Right.
It slips.
Right.
One of our pro cars, I think, it's slipped, and you could never tighten it up. It slipped about 3 miles an hour at 130 miles an hour.
Wow.
So we'd had a stick shift. We went 3 or 4 miles an hour faster.
Uh-huh.
It's almost impossible to lock it up.
Right.
Because it's going to slip one way or the other. Yeah.
Yeah.
And even in town, a nice crispy shift with a turbo, big block Chevy and a small car.
Mm-hmm.
You like the nice firm shift, and the higher the stall speed, you won't get that firm shift. It starts slipping every gear.
Interesting. Yeah.
When you shift, and I don't like that.
Right.
I don't agree with that.
Sure. Okay. I think this is our last question for today.
What about that Powerglide?
Pardon me?
What about that Powerglide?
Oh, we didn't get. Let's talk about the Powerglide.
Okay, the Powerglide. They made a couple different ones, and even the first ones were maybe a 172 gear and low gear, and it had a coarse spline tail housing on the back. I have one over there right now that had holes cut in the bell housing, about 3-inch holes in the bell housing on Powerglide, and never had a transmission cooler.
Hmm.
They let that air around that torque converter, and cool the converter.
So it's air cooled.
Yeah, air cooled the torque converter. Yeah, the first one didn't have a.
How many speeds did it have?
2-speed. Always been 2-speed.
Okay.
And so, anyways, with that was okay in a car, on a drag car a little bit. Then we end up with a fine spline Powerglide transmission, and that ended up with a 182 gear and thing. And then just south of our shop here in town, 1 mile south, there's a guy has a little gear shop down there. He makes I think he makes some shafts for Hughes torque converters, Hughes transmissions, my friends.
Uh-huh.
And they make the little planetary gears with different teeth on them. Now we can get a different gear ratio nobody else has. The Powerglide. In our Powerglides. Yeah.
Right.
And they do that.
Interesting.
But anyways, they make the little planetary gears. And then, so anyways, then from that, you end up with, that was a particular car, like a pro gas car, a certain speed. A 990 car, a 10 flat car, it's good for Powerglide. Because it goes about halfway down the track before it shifts.
Okay.
But nowadays, the bigger motors, the extreme motors, that Powerglide would shift within 10 feet. As many RPMs they're going.
Right.
So now they're taking that out, and I think Hughes takes a turbo 400 and leaves low gear out.
Oh, I see.
Yes. So now they use a 3-speed, maybe second gear, third gear, and fourth gear. And those high winding motors. Mm-hmm. And gets that. The first gear went down to go like 3 feet in first gear. And
yeah, no point to it. Yeah.
No point. Yeah. But they want the stop. They want the big transmission, the turbo 400s of strength.
Right.
And the guts. Powerglides was very strong.
Right. Right.
But again, I think Hughes down here makes all the Powerglides for all the monster trucks.
Oh.
And they make a certain case of sticker, so the case didn't break in two. Mm-hmm. And even the pressures are so high in the transmissions that blows the whole side of the tranny off.
Oh, wow.
But they have a special case for them, and the torque converter, and the oil pan, deep oil pan for them from everything, and the valve buys them. And the output shaft's huge. It's bigger than a 400 transmission. Output shaft, input. They make a whole transmission.
Right, right.
The transmission, that 2-speed transmission of Powerglide, I think it may be $12,000-$13,000 for the transmission.
Wow.
I think so. You have to talk to Hughes.
Yes. But
they'll sell you one, I'm sure.
Yeah. All right. So now we're at the last question.
Okay, now the last question.
And this goes back to, we were talking about Babbitt bearings.
Yeah. Okay.
And cutting and measuring the crank and looking for a bearing to replace the Babbitt bearing, if I remember right. So anyway, someone named Alan says, if the crank, this is a measuring question, and maybe it's how we talk about measuring. It's tricky. He said, but if the crank was turned 20 thousandths, wouldn't the bearings be 10 thousandths over? In other words, we're trying to compare
if you turn the crank, when they turn the crank, all the measurements we try to keep the same.
Right.
And you're not taking 20 thousandths off one side of the crank. You're taking 10 off this side of the crank, as it goes around,
Right.
and 10 off the other side.
That adds up to 20.
No, it don't.
Okay.
It's 10 under bearing. Because
Okay.
they took 10 off of it,
Okay.
all the way around the thing.
Right.
Then you'd have to have a bearing. The bearing would be 10 thousandths thicker bearing.
Okay.
It's all in a circle. Don't be trying to split the circle. Yeah.
So we
So
got to
if the cranks
remember.
turn 10 under, use 10 under bearings.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got to keep it straight.
Yeah, keep it straight. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Because it sounds like if you're turning a crank, that feels like one piece, and then you're ordering a bearing to match.
Yeah.
You're going to have to make sure you're careful how you describe it.
Yeah. But that's in the kind of machine. It's never changed. It's always been the same.
Okay.
Yeah. Got a 20 under crank. But we like that sometimes, since you turn the crankshaft and stuff. The bearing's thicker.
Hmm.
Yeah, the bearing's thicker by that much. So now you get more cushion out of the bearing.
Hmm.
And some of the early days, you took a brand new crankshaft and turned it 30 under.
Really?
Yes.
So you're not worried about the crank breaking?
No, that's not. It's going to, no, that's got nothing to do with that.
Okay.
A little bit is. So anyways, so you got a nice cushion bearing. And then the lead in the bearing will make it a little bit better, last longer.
Okay.
And also, when you cut the bearing down, I don't know if you want to get into that, it slows the crankshaft down because you got a smaller pulley, smaller circle.
Mm.
So if the crankshaft was 4-inch diameter, and it was going 7,000 RPMs, the difference between that crankshaft and the bearing is a lot of speed.
A lot of speed.
So if you turn it down a half an inch, put a smaller circle there, it slow that down, the crankshaft, like 30%.
Wow.
Slower speed. So NASCAR had that problem some time ago. They had a 350 Chevy crankshaft, or where they were running, maybe a 2 1/4 crankshaft, and they turned it down to 190
Right.
and put Toyota bearings in it
Huh.
and slowed that speed of the crank down, and it lasted for longer.
Interesting. Okay.
Well, I had
Ed-
302.
Yeah.
I hate to stir this pudding up a little bit more, but I had
Okay.
a 302 Ford motor a while back over here, and they took the crankshaft and ground all off of the 302, all off one side. So once you move the center of the crankshaft, they ground it all off one side, that moved it up, stroke it.
Yeah.
And then they put Ford Escort connecting rods in it because that was a 2-inch diameter or a 1/800,000th bearing. Ford Escort bearings in this 302, Chevrolet Pistons.
Really?
We're in a 302 Ford.
Huh. And it worked.
Yeah, well, it worked. It really all ran good. Let me go on anything, but anyways, it ran good
Right?
until it broke the crank.
Uh-huh.
And usually they did because when they ground on a 302 Ford, there's not enough webbing.
Just not enough there,
Yeah,
yeah.
that broke the crank later on, maybe 3 or 4 years later. It was all good. That's just another problem.
Yeah, that's a different problem. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Ed, thank you so much for answering all these questions.
Okay, we'll see. Yeah.
Yeah, this is good. We'll do it.
Christmas is coming.
Yeah,
A couple of days.
that's right.
All the gifts come flying down from somewhere. I don't know where.
I don't know where they
I
come
don't know where they come from either. Around our house, they quit coming down from several years ago.
from. That's right. Well, thank you for joining us again for another episode of Ask Ed, and we look forward to please keep sending in your questions. It's a lot of fun to think about them and answer them, and
Yeah.
it gives me a good excuse.
And I hope you enjoy them.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's very
enjoy
good.
it. We try to make it as easy as we can and simple for the normal people can
Yeah.
think about it, and we don't want to make it complicated at all.
No, and Ed, you do such a great job explaining things, and that's
Okay, good,
that's the
good.
joy of this.
Yeah.
Okay,
I like that.
excellent.
I should run for the president, maybe.
Somebody's already done that.
Oh, they did that. Yeah, we got a better one, I think, now.
Okay, me too.
Yeah, so
All
we
right.
don't want to get into that either.
No, we won't get into that. Not here. Well, thank you again, and we'll see you next time on Barry T's Garage.